Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland Reviewer, and welcome to the Wasteland, my weekly show where I take a deep dive into a particular film. And I'm going to sound like a broken record at this point, but I'm almost done Scorsese because been doing this since September, and now we're up to Hugo. So we're in the 2000 teens at least, so there's only a couple more. But this week I have a special guest who's going to be making his debut on my channel for the first time. We have Jake, who is a fellow writer at SiftPop. So Jake, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And Jake, would you like to shamelessly plug anything where people can find you and your thoughts on movies?
Uh, just SiftPop. I don't have a blog, another blog or another YouTube. That's sort of why I like the whole SiftPop thing. They
Yeah.
sort of take care of that side. So obviously not as prolific as Shane, but I usually do about 2 reviews a month,
Mhm.
and then I have a monthly column where I check out an underseen animated movie. So I should have 2 of those coming out. One the day before this airs. You'll be able to see my next animation celebration, underrated animated entry, and then in a few days, I should have my review of Black Crab.
Oh, nice. I actually got a chance to check that out. It's like sometimes you get some nice little gems that pop up from like the international markets on Netflix. And I'm a big fan of the animation articles because I love animated movies. And, there's plenty of things out there that's besides just Pixar and Disney and stuff like that. So that's always cool getting a chance to see a spotlight onto those. But for those who have not watched any of these shows before, which this is an interesting choice to start with Hugo, but there's 3 parts of this show where we go coming attractions for the week that this episode releases. We have our feature, which I mentioned is Hugo, and we do some recommendations to send you all home with because, all of your watch lists aren't long enough. So coming off with our coming attractions. So the week of March 18th, interesting because I use first showing as a way to keep track of like what's coming out, and there's like 14 movies on this list.
Yeah, nothing like huge,
No,
but there's some interesting stuff, like a handful of. I'll probably check that out eventually. Type
yeah,
things.
that
So
definitely has that vibe to it. There's like one Amazon one. There's a couple of limited releases coming out in theaters, and probably the biggest name one. Which Jake, what is your most anticipated movie?
I'm gonna go with the outfit. Um, it's just one of those things where I was sitting in the theater. And now, granted, like I live in Iowa, so I always take these release dates with a grain of salt. So whether this is actually coming to my AMC, I have no
Quote
idea.
unquote coming out March
Yeah,
18th.
yeah, but I just remember just sort of sitting in the theaters, and it's one of those trailers that starts, and it's just a premise to me,
Hmm.
um, where you just watch the trailer and can't at least be interested in what's going on, because like especially with the John Wick franchise, this seems like maybe another slightly more grounded, maybe version of that with some sort of underworld Taylor
Yeah.
type, um, and it's got a good cast, and it's just one of those things that immediately got my attention.
Yeah, I remember seeing the trailer for this, and I appreciate the connection to John Wick because like this feels like it could be like John Wick world, except in like the 20s and 30s and stuff like that.
And to be clear, it doesn't feel. I'm not saying like it feels like a ripoff, but
No,
you can definitely see some slight influences there.
there's no neon in this particular trailer. And like that whole underworld thing where it's like the outfit is this like interconnected group of like criminal organizations and stuff like that. And it has that cool kind of concept. And then it seems like it's just this claustrophobic kind of thriller. And you have Mark Rylance, you have Zoe Deutsch, you have Logan Lerman, and a couple other people as well. I think Johnny Flynn, he played David Bowie in a Bowie flick biopic that came out like last year, the year before. And it just seems like it could be an interesting movie. And as long as it hits some thrills and you get to see Mark Rylance doing his thing, why not? And that one definitely caught my attention too. The other one, though, the main reason I picked it is like it's an A24 movie and it's a horror movie. So you know it's going to be off the chain.
Yeah, I was supposed to go with our SiftPop editor Aaron to see Lamb. Never got around to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Horror. I'm not always horror depends. Like
Yeah.
I'm not always game for horror, but A24 does get me interested. And the other thing that really gets me interested and bumped it up to a very close second for me was I don't know. This appears to be the year of Jenna Ortega
Right?
with Scream and the Fallout. And she's good in both.
Yeah.
Really good in the Fallout, and I think really good in Scream too, or Scream also
Yeah.
with what she's given. And she's here again. So the fact that she's just sort of exploded and is now in this A24 horror film is another aspect that sort of has me intrigued about this.
That was definitely one of the selling points for me as well. So this is X, and it's about a bunch of young filmmakers going to make an adult film in a rural Texas town, and things go awry when some older Texans are like, "What the hell are you doing?" And this is from writer-director Ty West, who's made some interesting things, been attached to some interesting things like VHS, and was worked on Tales from the Loop, which was interesting. And it does have Jenna Ortega, who also makes the most random of cameos in Studio 666, that Foo Fighters movie too.
Oh yeah, I forgot you guys mentioned she was in that.
So
I haven't seen that one. Yeah.
For like 2 minutes. So don't get excited.
Well, but that's the thing. Like when you just sort of explode, like she sort of has, and I can only imagine that like the timeline of COVID filmmaking has sort of just compressed some of this because you don't know how like obviously she's not working on 4 films simultaneously.
Yeah.
So you don't know when she's making any of this, and it just happens to be they all come out and like Studio 66. It might have been like just when she was still looking for work, and now it comes out when she's already like been a huge hit this year.
I can guarantee you that movie could have totally been filmed like 5 years ago and just been sitting around. But I imagine like the Fallout probably got filmed relatively recently, especially because like it takes place in like a bathroom in like 2 houses.
Yeah, there's not a lot of different cast.
Yeah.
Like it's a very small cast. Even some of the cast, there's a lot of over phone stuff or like over Zoom stuff, with the therapy stuff. Yeah.
And this film also has Mia Goth in it and Kid Cudi, interesting enough. So I'm very intrigued about X, and I'm prepared for this to be absolutely insane. So honestly, that's why I picked it. But legitimately, there's a lot of movies to check out coming out this Friday. So keep an eye out for some of them. Like Mao is a new documentary coming out. Master, which I just got a chance to screen, is coming out on Amazon Prime on Friday. But there's just a lot of different kinds of films from all different kinds of outlets. So it might be a little difficult to keep track of all of them when they're actually releasing, because some of those theatrical releases I don't think are going to be like, I'm pretty sure X isn't releasing wide on Friday, so people are probably going to have to wait some time to actually see it at some point. But we're just buying time until next week. We're talk about the Lost City.
Oh, God, yeah, I might just find, if I was next week, I might just find, because that's another trailer that I've seen 20 million times.
Yes.
And there's there had to, for that to be my most anticipated for next week, I think literally nothing else would have to be
come out next week.
So,
I'm going in for the legitimately maybe 4 minutes that Brad Pitt has on screen.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee you he's in that movie for under 5 minutes. Because
yeah, it's one of those movies where, and you might get to it next week. I apologize for stuff.
Okay.
But it's one of those movies where you look at it and you're like, how did they get so many people to agree to this? Like, I guess on paper, like, you could, maybe they just did the elevator pitch and got them to sign on the dotted line before actually showing them the script. Because, I mean, in theory, I get how this could be funny, but, no.
I get that too. It seems like a stupid concept that could be funny. It just doesn't look like it is.
Yeah.
But that's more for next week when I'm talking about Wolf of Wall Street. So that'll be an interesting dynamic. But we're here to talk about Hugo. And so this is the 2011 family film that Martin Scorsese made, which was a 3D film. So like in theaters, this came out in 3D. It was shot in 3D, and you could see there's a bunch of shots that are meant to look like 3D shots and stuff like that. But it's very different. Well, on the surface seems very different for Scorsese, and then you find out it's basically a love letter to cinema, and then you're like, oh, wait a minute, that's very Scorsese, isn't it? But Jake, so what interested you in coming on and talking about Hugo today?
Well, it's the Scorsese film, oddly, that I've seen the most. Because I mean, I've seen The Departed, and that's when you'll catch, like, they play all the time on cable, and you'll catch it when it comes on. But cable sort of neuters that film because a lot of the fun of that film is how many F-bombs they drop and just the insanity of it, which you really can't portray cable. But like rewatching Hugo for me was probably the 5th time I've seen it. And I don't know that I've seen very many Scorsese's, even the really good ones, more than once. So it's just one of those weird, it's probably my favorite, maybe not his best, but I think it's my personal favorite. So.
And I could definitely see that because this is a wonderful film. Like I was even getting a little teary-eyed at one particular point when they started showing his film, getting me every time.
Dude, this movie just like, and it happened again last night while I was watching it, and it's weird to say because there are certainly some emotional moments, and it does go through some melodrama at points, but like for the vast majority of this film, I just have the biggest smile on my face anytime I watch this movie, which is not something you're usually saying about a Scorsese film, but which is interesting. But yeah, I just have like the widest grin on my face while watching this movie.
I definitely agree, and because some of Scorsese's other films that you probably have a smile on, you're probably like questioning if you should have a smile on your face.
Right. Exactly.
It's funny because I did just rewatch Wolf of Wall Street last night, and like most of that time, you're like. Also, side note: can they even show that on cable? Like, I can't imagine.
And the answer is no, they cannot.
I can't even imagine like how you cut that movie to make that not something that you can't show on TV. But like Hugo's just such a wonderful time, and it's a wonderful ode to old cinema. It has just the history of George Méliès and all of its homages to like slapstick and physical humor throughout the film, and like, you know, with like the clock face and everything, and all the foot chases with Sacha Baron Cohen, who with his unfortunate, well, like World War I wound, is like flinging around crazy. And you know, it's like, how often do you expect like a slapstick chase scene to be in a Scorsese movie? And then Sacha Baron Cohen just hilarious. Like his side
Yeah.
conversations with the guy from the orphanage about his wife leaving him.
Oh, it's so, and that's what I love about this film is, and it's from the very beginning. You have sort of the main story
Yeah.
about Hugo, and you know, and Millier, and trying to fix broken things and all that stuff. But from the very beginning, it very much builds the world of the train station
Yep.
and the people in it, and all those little side characters and their side relationships. And it just gives you so much to look at, and notice on sort of repeat viewings.
Yeah, and you know, you have this like the little romance between Mr. Dursley and the half giant lady from Harry Potter.
Yeah.
And their
So
doctor.
many Harry Potter alums.
Yeah.
Few of them made me sad, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah, and you know, you have that little thing going on. Like, it's like seeing Christopher Lee is not like a villain in something.
And yeah. Well, I guess we could get to it now. But yeah, all those little cameos, or more than cameos, but yeah, seeing Christopher Lee in a small role that didn't feel weird like it does in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, and all these people, like, it's also tinged with sadness because obviously Christopher Lee's gone, Richard Griffiths is gone, Helen McCrory is gone, so it does, make it sad as well. But it's just, he does it again with putting together a great cast, which I know you've talked about before with like The Departed. But the difference is, like The Departed, you look at it and go, man, these are just a ton of A-list.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. How did he do it? And here, it's a great cast, but like, how many of those would you put on the A-list? I don't think any. It's just a bunch of really great character actors doing really great characters. And it's just fantastic.
And like the closest to like an A-list actor in this movie is Jude Law, who's in it for like all of a couple minutes. But like, he makes an impact as Hugo's father. You have the Ray Winstone who just shows up being gruff and drunk.
Oh, he's such a bastard.
Yeah, sure is. And like Ben Kingsley, and that's the thing too, because a lot of these are Scorsese alum too, and like other films, because like Ray Winstone popping up in The Departed obviously had a much bigger role. Jude Law was in The Aviator, also for a small role as he was it Errol Flynn, I'm pretty sure. And you have like, you know, Ben Kingsley, who came back after Shutter Island. He obviously has a much bigger role in this particular film. And, you know, Scorsese did a great job of finding some young actors, because this movie's anchored by young actors.
Yeah.
And look at the two of them now. They're like legitimate stars at this point, with Asa Butterfield and Chloe Grace Moretz. And they're both really endearing. There's a couple moments where I think Chloe Grace Moretz is overacting a little bit, but like she's acting better than like 90% of kid actors in movies. And she shows like both of them are really talented. And it's so weird seeing Asa Butterfield after watching all those seasons of Sex Education and just being like, oh, he was a kid then.
Yeah, no, and yeah, they definitely do carry this film, and it's one of the things about the love of this film where I sort of overlook some of the nitpicks and things that used
Yeah.
to annoy me. Because like with Chloe Grace Moretz, who I think would have already done Kick-Ass by now, so she was already
Yeah.
a decent child star when this came out, and you're right. Her sort of precociousness does at times go over the edge
Yeah.
into being slightly annoying, but at large, she's really endearing. And the kid actors when I first saw this, 'cause I hadn't quite gotten into Scorsese yet. I didn't like super into Scorsese yet. I didn't watch it ahead of the Oscars. So it was like, what's this movie that's getting all the awards? I didn't see it in theaters. So I think I probably caught it on Netflix. And if I'm honest, it's the kids who were the draw for me, I think, at that time a little more than Scorsese was, because I was a huge Asa Butterfield fan.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you ever watched Merlin, the BBC show.
I have not.
He has a great recurring role as Mordred. He's
Okay.
fantastic in that. And Chloe Grace Moretz is obviously great. So I'm like, oh, they're in a movie together. Let's check this out. And they really do, sort of carry the movies as far as the performers go. I think there's another part of the movie that probably carries it even more.
And I think you're right in terms of everybody else is such a great character in the film and doing great character work. Obviously, I think McCrary and Kingsley have a little bit more to work with, especially because who they turn out to be and seeing their past. And God, him telling his story about filmmaking and that like up and down, just like feels so many feels right now, and just like this film is magic of cinema personified in a film. And like even like Michael Stuhlbarg popping up, and he's us. Like we're all sitting there like we just love movies, and this guy just loves movies, and he's just so happy to be there.
Well, and that's what's crazy is the whole magic of cinema thing. There's two sort of points on this. First of all, I finally watched it last year because it's on HBO Max, and I've been trying to catch up on classics. But the first few times, my like experience with Man in the Moon was this movie. Like I didn't watch the actual Man in the Moon till last year. I just saw the bits and pieces that they have in this film. So that was my exposure to that. And just that history film lesson is fantastic. And it's interesting because, like you said, the quote unquote magic of cinema thing can take on a pejorative sometimes. And, Hollywood rewarding movies about making movies and all that stuff. Like you don't even have to look to a different year. Like look how like reviled The Artist is just because it won the Academy. Like I haven't seen The Artist still. Like, and look how that's looked at because it's just Hollywood rewarding another film about making film. But there's something about how Scorsese does it that doesn't feel, I don't know if condescending is the right word, but like he's talking down to you, or like, oh, this is art. Like he really conveys like the whole magic of it. Maybe it's the whole like magician tie-in because I love actual magic or
Yeah.
something like that, and just drawing that connection. But like you really do feel the magic, and I think, like you said, that's a big part of why we're sitting through the movie with that giant smile on our
Yeah.
face, because it's just so magical.
Well, I think it's a combination of Howard Shore's score,
Yes,
which just feels so
yes,
amazing, and it's beautiful and has its own like magic feel to it. And it's Scorsese, and he's had films where they were ode to filmmakers, and you could tell he's a student of film because like any thriller he does, he's like channeling Hitchcock. And like this film just feels like he loves film so much and wanted to make a film that tells a story, because it has a story about a young man trying to find his place and trying to find his purpose and mending broken things. But the mending of a broken thing winds up being George Méliès, helping him come back from all the trauma that he went through, and just the whole entire thing of the montage of going through his life and how he found like literally turned magic into film making. And the whole scene where they are showing like a voyage to the moon and having those clips and everything, and you seeing it in motion and how they're reacting emotionally to it, you could feel it come off the screen. And like this reminded me of when I was watching Belfast this year, when they're sitting in the theater, you could feel how much it meant to them to be sitting in a movie theater, and that makes you feel that way too.
yeah,
And it's infectious, and this film is infectious in the way that it portrays that.
yeah. That's a great comparison, and you're right. Like the score does really. I can't believe that it didn't win the Oscar. Like the artist
I'm
won.
checking to see what did.
I got it. I checked last night
Oh, what?
because I'm like, what won? And like the artist won both the Oscar and the BAFTA, and it's weird because maybe it's anecdotal, but like when I put on my Pandora station,
Mhm.
Hugo comes up. The artist has never come up on my Pandora station. Like, and I don't, I don't see how that. I think they were probably wrong on that. But like you said, as far as the tone setting, like the first smile that hit my face was when that score kicked in.
Yep.
And I remembered how much I love it. Like, it's such a magical score. It just sets the tone for the entire thing.
Well, I think for me especially, because like I even turned to my fiance while watching this, because like what's Scorsese known for? Being one of the greatest American filmmakers ever. And his films are so American. It's like you watch something, it's so New York. Like half of his movies just exude New Yorkness.
Yeah.
And he captures Boston in The Departed. And this is one of his few films that is international, because before this, I feel like if I'm remembering correctly, it's only his faith-based films like Last Temptation of Christ and Kundun that were set elsewhere. So like this is a French set film, and it feels like you can tell, like obviously Scorsese's a huge fan of French cinema too, because like there's a lot of filmmakers that he brought a lot of influence from, but he conveys it so well in this film and creates that feel of Paris and the City of Lights. And just there's a reason why, because this did win production design, didn't it? Art direction.
Yes, I've got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and like we were talking earlier about how much on an acting level, the kids are the ones that really carry the film acting wise. But I think what really carries the film even more is sort of the technical stuff,
Yeah.
and that's where you get the 11 nominations and the 5 wins. Because so it won for cinematography,
Yeah.
sound mixing, sound editing, art direction, and visual effects. And all of those go in really crucial into what you're talking about,
Yep.
which is creating the feel of Paris and, you know, mostly and more specifically, creating the feel inside that train station.
Yep.
You know, it really helps sort of immerse you in that world.
Well, and you know, especially because this film was intended to be a 3D film, which I have my own feelings about that. I don't really care about that kind of stuff. Like, if a movie's great, it's gonna pull me in and make me feel like I'm there anyway. I don't need it literally coming out at me. But like, the effects are really impressive, and like this, it makes me sad because this movie cost upwards of $170 million and did not make a profit. And which this might be, well, besides The Irishman, I guess, the most, probably the most expensive Scorsese movie. But like, the art direction is beautiful. That train station is beautiful. The gears and like all the, like the clock tower and all those kinds of things, the gears, the steam, like the essence of steampunk throughout and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And you know, Robert Richardson, who's a consistent cinematographer collaborator with Scorsese through his whole entire career, and then Thelma Shoemaker, the editor as well. They're on their game with this, making this a beautiful film. And there's a couple of edits that were so great. Like, I think one of the best ones was when George Méliès is introducing his movies at the end, and that cut, I'm just like, even my fiance, who's not like super into film, was like, wow, that was great. And I'm like, sure was.
Yeah, when he backs up, like the person backs up and then just literally melds into the screen.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that, like, you know, and that's an interesting thing about the artist. And like, I enjoy the artist a lot. I actually own it. Like, I enjoyed that movie. I've watched that quite a few times. In hindsight, would I give that the Oscar for Best Picture? Probably not. Honestly, I'd pick Hugo for it. And I think what Hugo has going for it's like, it has Scorsese. Like, come on.
Yeah, I should probably give it another shot because I did try to watch it once when it was on Netflix, and you know, with the whole silent thing, like I've watched a few silent films, especially over the last year, and you know, like we talked about. With Hugo, you have the score that immediately hooks you. Like the fact that it's silent sort of makes it hard to get into for me. Maybe now that I've seen a couple, might give me, but like, um, just you know, I knew sort of the cinematographer and the visual effects people were sort of on their game from the first moment you sort of like. First of all, you have the tracking shots, and that's all stitched together visually, and it's just fantastic. Yeah, they do it so many times, and it's fantastic. But like, there's also those little details, like when you first see Ben Kingsley's character in his booth, and Hugo is spying on him, and they do the whole clock tower inside of his eye, which is a fun visual effect that is weird because I'll just never get tired of people doing it. It'll never be bad for me. It's one of those weird things. I just love that technique. But there's so many just fun little visual flares that they do in this movie. And like, yes, I don't go to 3D movies. I don't do 3D because my eyes have a tough time adjusting.
It gives me headaches if
Yeah,
I try to watch something like that.
Yeah, I just feel like by the time my eyes have adjusted and switched into 3D mode, the 3D thing you're trying to do is over. But it's interesting because I think I can feel at points, even without like the 3D being literally 3D, you can sort of just feel it. Like, particularly in the sequence when they drop the drawings on the floor, and they just go everywhere, and you get that fantastical moment of the drawings literally changing and exploding out of the box and just floating and rotating. Like, I don't need a 3D television to make that feel like it's just sort of coming out at you with how it's shot. It just feels it. You can just feel it.
Well, I think that's the difference between great filmmaking and just I'm trying to make a 3D movie filmmaking, because that, like, you're right. It feels like it's coming at you and wrapping you in all these beautiful visuals. And so Mad Max Fury Road is one of my favorite films of all time. But that damn shot at the end of the movie where that steering wheel comes like woo, like right up into your face, it's just like that was the most annoying shots in this whole entire movie, because you can tell that was there because they wanted it to be like actually in 3D at that moment. But like that scene that you bring up, Jake, of the picture just swirling around, that just engulfs you in that moment and the emotion. And that's the thing, there's so many great emotional moments in this film, and there's exhilarating ones like fun chase scenes or like the train coming in, and there's some horrifying ones, like him waking up and having that nightmare of him turning into the automaton. Just like, holy crap.
Yeah, the double nightmare is just sort of terrifying, and it's weird because like the tones at points can be a little disparate when they're trying to balance the sort of slapstick and terrifying, but I think there are points when it works for the Sacha Baron Cohen character, like when you're introduced to him and he needs to seem like a threat. I think they do that well. But the chase scenes are great, particularly the final sort of chase when they go up inside the clock tower.
Yes.
And that's just like, you have the obvious Keaton reference that they literally dropped for us inside the movie.
Earlier in the movie.
But that's just a great chase scene, as they're trying to navigate it.
Well, I think this might sound weird, but like this is one of my favorite Sacha Baron Cohen roles, because it's a serious role. Like, he has trauma on his own. He is this guy who's very to the book, but he's snarky, and that's what makes him funny. But he's not, he is serious, but the situation around him silly because of his leg and him like running into like the musicians and stuff like that. But like, he's serious and he's snarky, and the way that he interacts with people, because he's not good at it, turns out to be humorous. Like the whole entire, like I mentioned before, the phone call thing where it's just like, oh, she left you, and like later in the film's like, are you sure it's yours? She came back and it's like, what?
Well, have you had relations in the last year? No.
Exactly. It's just like, he's asking the tough questions, and like, he's a fun character, and like, Ben Kingsley's such a grump for like half of this movie, and then seeing him come back to life is so wonderful. And like, that's the thing, this movie's just wonderful. It is such a amusing movie, and I remember watching this with a friend of mine. Her boyfriend and I were very close friends, and him and some of our other friends had to do something, so we were waiting for them to come back, and we had like a couple hours. I'm like, I'm gonna put on a movie, and she's like, what are you putting on? I'm like, I'm gonna watch Hugo. And like, Hugo's not exactly, it's like, this is the kind of movie that you could actually show somebody who's not a big fan of film and be like, they're gonna love this, and you're like, you just watched a Scorsese. And that's the kind of thing, it's like, this is a his biggest like mainstream crossover that like a whole family could enjoy this movie. And there's very few of his films that you could say that.
Well, and the other thing I think about this one is like I was looking at how many have I seen all the way through, and I haven't. You know, obviously you're going through all of them now, so you will have seen all of them shortly.
Yeah.
But like I've only seen I think it was 9 of
Mhm.
them. Um, and one of the issues I think with Scorsese is, you know, if you're in the, let's say you're in the mood to watch a movie, you're like, what should I do? Well, what has Scorsese done? And you start going through his IMDb. And you're like, oh, that could be interesting. And then you start looking at the runtime, which I know isn't the only thing. But, you know, you start looking at things and you see things like, oh, this is almost 3 hours long. Oh, I don't know if I have time for that.
Yeah.
Like, this is like just over 2 hours. So I think this is a movie that does exactly what it wants to do, exactly how it wants to do it, but doesn't really overstay its welcome.
Mhm.
There are like there are some slow moments. People are like, oh, nothing, but it's he's very particular in where he slows things down and
Mhm.
ramps things up. Like we've talked about from the beginning, he intersperses those slow character moments
Yep.
with um, with those high intensity chase scenes and all that stuff. And I think it's just tastes beautiful.
Yep. And it's funny because it's like I just rewatched Wolf of Wall Street, 3 hours. I'm gonna be watching Silence, almost 3 hours. The Irishman, 3.5 hours. It's just like I'm gonna be spending a lot of time watching Scorsese for these last couple ones. But that's true. This is a briskly paced film that knows when to put on the gas, when to pull up on the gas, when to push on the gas. And it just works so well. But I guess, Jake, at this point, what final thoughts, concerns, comments do you have about Hugo?
Yeah. So I know we've been pretty glowing, and that's
Yeah.
just because I love this movie. So I've sort of overlooked some of the nitpicks at this point.
Mhm.
But you know, like we said, it jumps from comic like the slapstick
Yeah.
to the tense, and that can be jarring at times. Um, like you talked about how much this is a love letter to Paris.
Mhm.
That love obviously doesn't expand to French actors. This is the most British Paris you'll ever see in your life. And, you know, which is fine. I love movies that, like, there are a ton of British movies that are like, we're the Germans, you know,
Yep.
Scottish accent. And I don't care. As long as you establish it, don't mention it, that's fine. But seeing Richard Griffith in a beret is just amazing. Um, and then, uh, like, the one well there are a couple of animated things I think, and I'm just not a stop motion guy, so in something that uses animation so well, like throughout, that mouse scene when Hugo fixes the mouse
Mhm.
and he winds it up and it goes, that's always seemed so jarring
Mhm.
to me, you know, because the rest of the animation they do is so smooth and it's so sort of even if it's by design it's so rickety and
Yep.
it just doesn't fit, but like as you can tell I'm just it's just moments that sort of take me out that I've and then I guess at the end like this movie conveniences so hard, but again I don't care
Yeah.
because I love this movie, and that's the thing. Like, there's a ton of little nitpicks that I pick up every time I watch it. Because again, you're noticing things you haven't seen before. But at this point, I'm past the point of caring because it's a it is a flawed movie at points, but I don't care because it makes me happy and
Yeah.
it makes me smile, and that's what it's supposed to do. So Miss
Well, and that's the thing too, and I could agree with that, Jake, because it's like I love this movie so much that I don't personally care. When I'm watching this movie, I'm like, huh, that shot looks a little dated at this point with like this, because like some of the shots are really CGI, and it is 2011 CGI. And there's
Right.
parts where it's just like it really over relies on computer generated like backgrounds and stuff like that.
Well,
It,
and sorry, just
yeah.
hop in. That's another thing I wanted to mention because, like, I got this as a DVD years ago, and it's I have a 4K player and a 4K TV, but I'm still watching it on a DVD, and I'm like, is this streaming anywhere? Because it has to have gotten a 4K update, and it's not. So that's the one thing I wish I could have done before going. I don't know if there is a 4K of Hugo, but I would have loved to have seen it in 4K because you're right. I'd love to see what the visuals look like now if they could just sort of update it a little bit and see it in the most optimum um, way, which I could not because I didn't.
Yeah, and Aaron, if you're listening, next time you do where we want to request new Criterion movies, let's get Hugo on 4K Criterion right now. Get all the behind the scenes. And yeah, there's definitely like this movie ends with a nice bow and just like tie it up real nice. And obviously there's some emotional weight to things, but like yes, it's a nice clean movie at the end and it's a great feel good movie. But like if you do want to nitpick, there's areas to nitpick, but you know, if you don't care, you don't care. And I think both of us don't care. We just loved it so much. But those are our thoughts on Hugo. Now we're going to shift gears into our last segment. It's giving some recommendations to all of you lovely people watching and listening. So, Jake, what would you like to recommend?
So everybody says, oh, I'm gonna watch more classic films, fill in some of my classic, and I've been failing at that till like last year when I really started to try to get into more classics. I went super hard last year. I'm probably not gonna go quite as hard this year, but if you are trying to watch some classic films and trying to figure out, oh, where do I start? As part of it being Oscar month, HBO Max is doing 31. Is that how many days are in March?
Yes.
31 days of the Oscars. Through their TCM hub, where they highlight a different Oscar winner every day, have a bunch of different Oscar winners in different categories. And the first film they did, highlighted, actually filled another one hole that I've been trying to fill. Is my Sidney Poitier.
Mhm.
Oh, I have only ever seen him in Sneakers before this year, and I really wanted to try to get some of his other classics in there. So I watched In the Heat of the Night. And it's crazy. Both In the Heat of the Night and Look Who's Coming Together came out in the same year. And
Yep.
that's insane to me. But In the Heat of the Night, he's a police detective from Philadelphia who stays on to help solve a murder in this racist town in the South. And
Mhm.
I love a good mystery. This is a good mystery, great mystery, but on the surface. But more than that, like the tones that it tries to hit, and subtly how it just sort of does plays with racism and all that stuff. It is 60s movie, so take that for what it's worth. But it's a great performance. You can like see all the emotions that
Mhm.
Sidney Poitier has going through all these, because this is not a place he wants to stay any longer than he wants to at points, but he really wants to solve this crime,
Mhm.
and it just plays with all, like, people are waffling back and forth, and the relationships are just so interesting with how things develop and how uh, they're just going through this mystery. I just had a really great time watching somebody act their ass off for you know an hour and 40 minutes or whatever it is. If you've, never seen a party film, I think this is a great place to start because you get some of that social stuff that's he does in some of his other films, paired with just a fantastic mystery. So,
And they call him Mr. Tibbs.
yes, that is the famous Mr. Tips, and it's
uh,
great.
it's a great film, and that's definitely one of the highlights of Poitier's career, and especially in cinema in the late 60s. And that was part of like that, and Bonnie and Clyde, I think, were some of like the new cinema at the time, and definitely worth checking out. So my recommendation, which I just watched from my watch list, was Purple Rain. And so basically, if you love Prince music, it's definitely worth watching because, not gonna lie, I got into every single song that got played in that movie. Does it have a great plot? Not really. It's just, stereotypical schmaltzy melodramatic romance. And has some over the top like trauma in Prince's life, his character. But like, dang, it's it basically is just a string of music. Might as well just be a string of music videos for a whole entire movie. But if you're into that, it's definitely worth checking out. So I had a lot of fun with that. Oh, and especially when he starts playing Purple Rain towards the end of the film, it's just like, bam. But my other recommendation is a new film, and it's the Bulgarian entry for the Oscars this year. I don't recall if it made the short list or not, but it didn't get nominated. But it's called Fear. And it's a dark comedy, and it's about a woman in a small Bulgarian town on the Turkish Bulgaria border who finds a black man from Africa who wanders onto her property, holds him at shotgun point, and is just like, get off my property kind of thing. But like, he winds up being harassed and stuff like that. And she winds up letting him into her home. And over the course of this film, you see this connection grow. It has a lot of themes dealing with racism and prejudice and like small town kinds of politics and stuff like that. Interesting enough, it has a lot of similar things in the heat of the night.
We
I'm just
did
like,
not
wait a
plan
minute.
this. I'm like, oh, hey, that sounds familiar. As you're describing this movie, I'm like, oh, little Gran Torino vibes, and then you're like, oh, small town politics. Hey, wait a minute.
Wait a second. We're talking about the same movie.
In the heat of the night.
So,
Yeah.
but the thing is, like, this is definitely a black comedy because, like, it's a funny movie too. And, like, you could tell the tone from the very beginning. She's riding her bike, and some uh, jerk from town just rides up next to her, and she completely just destroys him, shoots him down in flames. And, like, there's definitely great humor in it, but it has the weight of things. And there's definitely some like purposeful caricatures and idiots in the town that are played for laughs, but like it's conveying these hard issues. And like, I'm like, good for international film this year because there's a lot of great movies that are out and about now. And like, I rented this on Vudu. I can't remember if this was on Amazon or not. I think it wasn't, which is why I did rent it on Vudu. Because generally I just rent things on Amazon if I'm going to watch something on VOD, except Vudu sometimes gets them a little bit beforehand. And I think this one did. And it was definitely worth it. And especially, there's so many great ones out there like Drive My Car, The Worst Person in the World, A Hero, which didn't even get nominated, Flea. And then if you want to go really out there with Titan and like Bad Luck Banging and stuff like that. This has been a crazy year in
Uh,
cinema,
yeah.
at least internationally. And so this one, throw that in there because Fear is definitely a worthy entry for the Bulgarian nomination. But yeah.
Yeah. It's been an interesting one because I've seen Worst Person on the Wall a couple weeks ago, which was interesting. Drive My Car, really good. Don't get me started on Titan.
I feel like, which is funny because people are like, the most divisive film of the year, Don't Look Up, and I'm like, but have you seen Titan? Because oh, that's an experience.
And it was an experience which I did not like very much. So
It is. That definitely pushes your boundaries for like how much you're willing to like suspend your disbelief and also accept in a movie. And
nope.
like I've definitely had conversations with people who are just like, no.
Well, it's interesting. Cause I'm like, it was like fluttering between, I think I kind of like this. It was okay. And then the third act hit, and I'm like, nope. That I can pinpoint that third act is where it went from. I
like,
can
nope.
maybe
Goodbye.
like you said, how much can you accept? I cannot accept this. We're done. I'm out.
I'm pretty sure people walked out of my theater watching that, which is funny because quick side note before we wrap up, I rewatched Wolf of Wall Street last night for next week's episode. And when I saw Wolf of Wall Street in a theater, there was an old couple who walked out within the first like beginning montage. I think it was the snorting coke off of a prostitute's ass was the moment where like this old couple was just like, nope, I'm out, goodbye.
But like, what did they see? Like, I don't get that one. Like, sometimes if you walk out of a movie, I get. Walking out of, like, how can you walk out of Wolf of Wall Street? That's one of those films where if you didn't know what you were walking into, that's on you.
Yeah, to be fair, Titan, that trailer didn't give away anything. Like that, like it gave you a vibe. You had no idea really what this movie was about. So if you walked out of that, I'm not surprised. But Wolf of Wall Street, how did you not go into that movie thinking that this was just going to be 3 hours of like extreme debauchery? I guess I don't recall if they had a red band trailer for Wolf of Wall Street, but like just look at it. What do you expect? But anyway.
But a lot of the buildup was breaks the record for most F-bombs in a movie. So, I mean, come on.
Yeah. Samuel L. Jackson is not happy that Jonah Hill has the most F-bombs in movies. Or I think he wants a recount.
Yes. But again, here we go, stepping on next week again. So.
Yeah, there we go. See, a wonderful tease for next week. But if you haven't seen Hugo, treat yourself because it's a wonderful film. But Jake, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.